Hello guys. Alrighty, so we are going to talk about behavioralism. So this was the chapter that we had tons of people like prince and kings, and then they all had an animal of choice. So there's just a lot of people in this chapter. And then in your hand mnemonic, this is going to be your middle finger because it's a behavior that's learned because we weren't born knowing what the middle finger stands for. So all of this is going to be part of behavioralism. So what behavioralism is that it is the role of learning and experience is basically what contributes to psychology. A strict behavioralist believes that babies are tabula rasa. So quick review, that is going to be John Locke. And the study of psychology should focus purely on observable behaviors and not unobservable thoughts. So if you are a strict behavioralist, you do not care about consciousness or dreaming. It has to basically be able to be seen, to be measurable, and to be observed. Okay, so learning. Again, a behavioralist, relatively permanent change in behavior that results from experience. So to them, in order for us to know that you have learned something, there should be a permanent change, whether it's like a higher test score or, you earn more points in a sports game or you play an instrument. Like I have to actually be able to see a change for us to think that you have learned something. If you're a cognitive psychologist, it's saying that learning is made evident by behavioral change, but learning can also be defined as something that's internal and not directly observed. So I'm sure there's a lot of us, you've taken a class maybe that your grade didn't necessarily reflect what you know. So let's say you're going through a lot and you're really stressed out and your grade is maybe a C or a D or even an F. A behavioralist would say, oh, you have not learned anything in psych. But if you're a cognitive psych person, they would say, well, no, just because your grade doesn't reflect your learning, you might actually know a lot in your brain, but it's just not actually seen on paper. Okay, so when it comes to, I can't get this to go, okay? So associative learning that certain events occur together. So blank is an involuntary behavior is determined by what precedes it. Okay, that's going to be classical conditioning. So one, the behavior is involuntary, so like sweating, heart rate, blushing, and it's determined by what comes before it. Operant conditioning is all about rewards and punishments. And so the behavior is going to be voluntary. So, raising your hand, taking a test, playing basketball, jumping, and then it's determined by what follows it. Okay, so identifying the parts. So this is all classical conditioning. So we have the unconditioned stimulus, unconditioned response, conditioned stimulus, conditioned response. So for example, in this one, this was going to be Pavlov. He is going to be your king of classical conditioning. His animal of choice was going to be dogs. Oops. Okay, so basically when you give dogs meat powder or food that is unconditioned, it's unlearned, dogs will naturally then salivate. So that's an unlearned response. Eventually, if I ring a bell, present it with food, bell, food, bell, food, eventually the dog is going to then salivate to just the bell. So then that becomes a conditioned response. Okay, this person who was in charge of the little Albert experiment, it was going to be John Watson. And so he is a behavioralist. He's one of the founding fathers of behavioralism. And he basically did this experiment with little Albert, which now obviously would be really unethical. And he showed little Albert a white rat. And then every time he showed him a white rat, he would make a loud noise behind him. And eventually every time little Albert saw the white rat, he would then get scared and start crying. So when you're breaking down the formula, the unconditioned stimulus is the loud noise, is going to naturally make a baby cry. Every time you see the white rat, the baby's going to then cry. Okay. Another person that dealt with this was, what was his name? Oh my gosh, now I'm having a brain fart. John Garcia. Thank you. Okay, so John Garcia, that says Garcia, guys. He came up with taste aversion. So taste aversion is a fancy way of saying food poisoning, right? So if you look at this, let's say food poisoning, okay? You ate bad, I don't know, what did you eat that was bad? Let's say you ate bad seafood, like it wasn't cooked right, okay? So bad seafood. The actual food poisoning, that says seafood. The actual bacteria in the seafood that wasn't cooked well is what made you sick. Okay, So now every time you see seafood, you get sick, okay? Or any sort of fear experiences. So let's say you were bit by a dog, okay? So dog, the actual biting of the dog makes you cry or experience pain every time you, every time you see any sort of dog, puppy, big dogs, little dogs, you then are also going to cry. So that's how classical conditioning happens. I think another one I talked about too was like me and at church, and like I get sweaty because I get nervous to talk to people. So this one would be talking to people is going to make me sweaty. Every time I see the church, it makes me sweaty. Okay, so then just definitions. Acquisition is the initial learning. It's the first time you realize, oh, these two things are connected. So a bell, food, bell, food. Okay, every time I hear bell, food's going to come. Or every time I go to church, I'm going to have to talk to people, so then I'm going to sweat. So every time I eat seafood, I'm going to get sick. So then you start learning that there's a relationship there. Okay. Then you have extinction. So this is basically the diminished response to the conditioned stimulus when it is no longer coupled with the UCS. So if I keep ringing the bell at my dog and then never giving him food, eventually he's no longer going to respond to the bell. Or those of you that walk your dogs and you pick up the leash and they get really excited, if you're just kind of wave the leash in front of them for forever and then you never take them for a walk, at some point it's going to become extinct and they're not going to respond to the leash. Let's say again after months and they start getting excited, then that is going to be called spontaneous recovery. It's the reappearance of the extinguished conditioned response. Okay, this one is generalization. It's where you're going to respond to anything that's similar to the original stimulus. So let's say your dog gets excited to just the one bell that you have. So bell, meat, he responds to the bell. If he starts to respond to any bells, and starts salivating to anything that sounds like a ring, then that would be generalization. Or let's say you guys get sick from Taco Bell. Like it's just Taco Bell, I don't know, meat tacos. But if you start to kind of get sick with all meat tacos and all tacos or even all Mexican food, then that would be generalization. The opposite of this is going to be discrimination. It's the ability to distinguish. So you only get sick to that specific taco from Taco Bell. Not all of Taco Bell, not all Mexican food. You only salivate to that one specific bell. You only get excited from that one leash that the owner has. So it's very much tailored to just one specifics, whereas generalization is anything that's similar to it. Okay, then again, application to little Albert. So let's say if little Albert was generalized, if he got sad or cried to anything that was white, that looked similar to a white rat, that would be generalization. To teach him how to discriminate, he basically would just only cry to that specific white rat or anything that was a white rat. How do we condition him to become extinct? We pretty much would expose him maybe to the white rat with no loud noise behind him and eventually show him that a white rat isn't scary, and hopefully then that would become extinct. But then let's say little Albert's still alive and all of a sudden randomly as an adult, he starts to panic or cry because he sees a white rat somewhere or a stuffed animal, a white rat, then that would be called spontaneous recovery. It's right here. Okay, then higher order conditioning is a previously neutral stimulus comes to serve as a CS after being paired repeatedly with a stimulus that has already become the CS. So this is basically just one step higher. So the original Pavlov experiment with the meat and the bell, it was bell, meat, salivate, bell, meat, salivate. But let's say I shine a light, so it's light, bell, and then meat, light, bell, meat. Eventually, if they start to salivate to just the light, that's one higher up. Or let's say you're excited for your parents to come home. And so every time you hear the garage door opening, you get excited. So that's normal conditioning. But let's say your parents always come home at 3 o'clock, which is when Ellen's show is on. So now it's going to go Ellen's show, garage door opening. You get your parents come home, you get excited. Eventually, you're just going to get excited to Ellen. Ellen would be the higher order up. Another example of this can be, let's say you don't like someone at school. and they make you feel all these negative feelings, but then now you're starting to feel negative feelings for anyone that they're friends with, even though you don't really necessarily know them. That would be considered higher order conditioning. It's just one step above what you've already been conditioned to. Okay, this one, how we're going to get rid of fear, is flooding. We talked about this before in our therapies chapter as well. So flooding is basically a fear-evoking reduction technique to kind of get rid of your fear. So it's kind of like if you're afraid of spiders, I'm just going to throw you into a room full of spiders and say, okay, get over it. Or if you're afraid of water, I'm just going to shove you into the ocean or shove you into the pool. For some people, that works really well. It's like, oh my gosh, you're forcing me to get over my fear. But a lot of times flooding can be really unpleasant, even though it can work depending on the person. A better way is probably to desensitize. So systematic desensitization is exposing them gradually to the fear-evoking stimuli under circumstances in which the client or the person is relaxed. So those of you that are afraid of heights, instead of me just flooding you and taking you to the very top and say, okay, look down, I'm going to do it kind of gradually. I'm going to say, okay, let's go to floor number 1. Look over the railing. Are you nervous? If you are, we're going to do deep relaxation techniques, deep breathing, calming. Once you feel really comfortable with level 1, we're going to go to level 2. Do the same thing. Are you relaxed? Are you calm? Do deep breathing. And then level 3, level 4, until you can finally get to the top of the building and be okay. Okay. Then this one is pretty much counter conditioning. And so the person that came up with this, do we remember? It's going to be the Joneses. Mary Clever Jones is in your people packet. And so this is basically you are going to pair a pleasant stimulus with the fear-evoking object. And the person they did this with, so their animal of choice is going to be Peter. And so what they did was that Peter was afraid of rabbits, but he loved cookies. So then they would let him eat cookies, and then they would slowly bring in the rabbit into the room closer and closer. Eventually, he was then holding the rabbit and eating the cookies at the same time. So then it counter-conditioned that fear. Okay, so then practical applications. We keep talking about this. So when it comes to like drug addiction, let's say you're an alcoholic, we might then put something that makes you have diarrhea or nausea in your beverage. So then every time the addict is going to drink the alcoholic beverage, they're going to then be conditioned to respond with vomiting. And so the whole idea of it is the fact that we want them to then know, okay, I need to change my association. So every time I drink, I get sick. Eventually, I'm going to stop drinking. The problem with classical conditioning and behavioralism is that they take away the cognitive aspect of it. For some addicts, they know that people are purposely putting things in their drinks to make them get sick. So they also know cognitively that they can go to a bar and there would not be any drugs in there. And so they can also then drink and still get the same effects that they normally would have before. And so that's kind of some of the criticisms against behavioralism, that you cannot completely take out cognition because that's a huge part of who we are. All right, then we have, so in classical conditioning are two people. They were Pavlov and Watson. Pavlov's animal of choice was dogs, and then Watson's animal of choice was little Albert. Okay, moving on to operant conditioning. So this is all about rewards and punishments. Okay, so the difference, again, classical conditioning, the behavior is what comes before it. So the bell and then the meat, the bell and then the meat. The reaction is involuntary, sweating, blushing, salivating, blinking, okay? Operant conditioning is what follows it. You do something, and then I give you something or I take something away. What you're doing is voluntary, doing your homework, talking back to your parents, running away, playing basketball, doing your homework, blah, blah, blah. Okay, I think I said that already. So the dog is going to sit in anticipation of getting a treat. Dog sits, I give him a treat. Dog sits, I give him the treat. So it comes after. Okay, it's a simple form of learning in which an organism learns to engage in behavior because it's reinforced to do so. So what comes after their behavior is going to then decide whether or not we continue to do what we do or to stop. Okay, so this guy, Edward Thorndike, we're always going to connect him with law of effect. His animal of choice is going to be cats. He basically did a trial and error box. So he basically put cats in a box and there was a cover. And then if the cats were like just, roaming around, trial and error in the box, if they were to pull the string on accident, the top would pop off. So then the cat can then leave the box. And so eventually, as cats realized, oh, hey, if I pull this string, I can leave, it started to realize, okay, and learned that if I just pull this thing, I can now escape. So that whole idea is called the law of effect, that responses are stamped in by rewards. So when you're rewarded for something like a sticker, money, praise, being released from a box, that understanding of that behavior is going to get stamped in. So then you're going to keep doing it, ideally. And then things that get punished are going to be stamped out. So maybe, using your phone in class, you get a referral. So now you learned, okay, I should not use my phone in class. So then ideally that behavior would then get stamped out. Okay, then we have, okay, we have B.F. Skinner, also a father of behavioralism as well. And so he had two animals. So he had rats, and then he also had pigeons. Okay, so he talked about reinforcement a lot. So reinforcement is to follow a response with a stimulus that is going to increase the frequency of the response. And then operant conditioning is all about what we do based off of consequences, whether they're positive or negative. All right, the Skinner box. So the rats. He pretty much had rats roam around in a cage, and there was this little lever. And then if you were to actually touch the lever, then the food pellets would come out. So eventually the rats learned that, hey, if I keep pushing this lever, more food is going to come out. So then they learned to push the lever. In our class that day, I believe our example or our activity was the naming girl names. We sent half the class outside, and then the other half was inside. And when we brought them back in, you guys had to ask them, can you please give me a list of girl names? And then I think the reward was nerds, I think, that day. So it was like, you said a boy's name, they didn't get a reward. Say girl's name, reward, girl's name, reward. Eventually you asked them the pattern. What's the pattern? And they said, oh, it's girls' names. So that's what we did in class. So they were all our little rats, and you guys were all in the Skinner box. And you got candy. Okay, types of reinforcers. So positive reinforcers is what's presented, and then a negative reinforcer is what is removed. So it's not about bad or good. Okay, so a positive reinforcer is that when you present something, it's going to increase the behavior. Negative reinforcers, you are going to take away something, and it's still going to increase the behavior. Okay. Primary reinforcers are things that we kind of need for biological makeup. So we need food, water, warmth, and safety. Secondary are things that have more like associations like money, attention, social approval. And so both of them are types of reinforcers. Some of you guys are really driven by food. Some of you guys are really driven by praise and attention and love. So it just kind of depends. Some of us are really driven by money. So anything can kind of reinforce what we do. Okay, so a positive reinforcer. So you guys study. That is a good behavior. Okay, I give you positive praise or money. You keep doing it. Keep studying. Okay, negative reinforcer. You're still studying. That is awesome. Okay, good behavior. But this time I'm going to take away something bad, which is your maybe parents nagging or yelling. Or judgment, and so from other people, and then so you keep studying. So it's kind of the difference. Okay, a punishment is going to be the behavior is not good. That's why this is a punishment. Okay, you're talking in class. I'm going to add something you don't like, which is maybe a referral or a detention or yelling. You stop doing that behavior. Okay. So the difference is a negative punishment, and I'll do this whole chart again. Remember, this is the chart that we drew in class. Anytime you see the word reinforcement, you want to increase. Anytime you see the word punishment, you want to decrease the behavior. So positive reinforcement, okay, the action's good. We study. Okay, you guys are going to study. I'm going to give you something. I'm going to add something that you like. Let's say it's money. Okay, you are going to keep studying. Negative reinforcement. Okay, the behavior is still good. You're still studying. But this time I'm going to take away something you don't like, which is my yelling. Okay, I'm not going to yell at you. So then you, to prevent me from yelling at you, you are going to keep studying. Okay, positive punishment. The behavior is bad. You used your cell phone in class. Okay, I'm going to add something bad that you don't like, which is a referral. You are going to stop using your cell phone in class. Okay, negative punishment. You're still using your cell phone. Okay, the referral didn't work. So instead, I'm going to take away something you like, which is I'm just going to take away your cell phone. So now you stop using your cell phone in class. Okay, let's say we talked about the final. If I was to remove the final, so if I said, if you end up with an A in my class before finals hits, you will not have to take the final. Which one would that be? Okay, it would be negative reinforcement. Because you're studying, I take away something you don't like, which is the final, you keep studying. Okay, we talked about grounding. So grounding can be either positive punishment or negative punishment, depending how you word it. So grounding, if I'm going to add the grounding, it's going to be, let's say you, I don't know, talked back to your parents. I'm going to add the punishment of the grounding. You are going to stop talking back to your parents. To view it as a negative punishment, you talked back to your parents. I'm going to remove something you like, which is your freedom of going out. Like this whole coronavirus thing, it's all being taken from all of us. We can't go out. We are going to stop talking back to our parents. So that's kind of how that chart works. All right, so then we have the reinforcement schedule. This part is probably the more confusing part of the chapter. So we have fixed, variable, interval, and ratio. Okay, so your different combos is that you can have a fixed, ratio, schedule and reinforcement. You can have a variable ratio. You can have a fixed interval, or you can have a variable interval. Okay, so if it's a fixed schedule, that means it is set, you know when it's going to happen. If it's variable, it's unpredictable and it's random. Interval is a set amount of time. Ratio is a number. So you have to do something in order to get rewarded. A continuous schedule is rewarded every single time. It's kind of like fixed. Partial is not every time, so it's kind of like variable. Okay, so the different types we talked about. So we have fixed ratio, variable ratio, fixed interval, and variable interval. Okay, so a fixed ratio is a set number of times. You know every time you do something, you're going to get rewarded. So every 3 times you raise your hand, you know I'll call on you. For every 5 books you read, you know you're going to get $5. Or for every 3 dishes you wash, you're going to get a popsicle. Okay, so it's very fixed. You know exactly when you're going to get rewarded. A variable ratio, you have no idea. So a slot machine, buying lottery tickets. So people get really addicted to gambling is because sometimes when you do the thing like pulling the lever or playing blackjack or, playing poker, you get rewarded randomly, and that can be very addicting because you're just waiting around for the reward. So a variable ratio is going to actually keep you doing something longer than a fixed ratio, because a fixed ratio, if you don't do something, you're not going to get something. So then you're just going to stop doing it, or you're just going to keep doing it, and you know exactly when you're going to get rewarded. A variable ratio, you don't know when you're going to get the reward, and that whole waiting around is enough to kind of keep us in it. So then we're going to, keep doing what we're doing. A fixed interval is a set amount of time. So those of you that have jobs, most of us get paid either every 2 weeks, every week, or once a month, but you know exactly when you're going to get your paycheck. So that could then determine, how you spend your money, how you pay your bills. This can also be, at 7 p.m. every night is when Jeopardy's on. So then you know exactly when that show is going to be on. A variable interval is unpredictable. So like fishing, you can just leave your fishing pole there and you have no idea when a fish is going to catch. A lot of us are addicted to our cell phones, which I'm one of them too. And we're always kind of just waiting around for either notifications or a text message or an email. And that is going to be a variable interval, because even without us doing anything, we can still get that information. And then that becomes really addicting. It's unpredictable, but it keeps us waiting around with our phones. Okay. So again, the words are here. You are going to, when it comes to a fixed ratio schedule, another example is a food pellet for every 5 times of hitting your desk. So every time you hit your desk 5 times, you're going to get a food pellet. A variable ratio is you have no idea when this food pellet is going to fall from the sky. A fixed interval is every 2 minutes, you're going to know a food pellet is going to come out. And then a variable interval is randomly food pellets are going to be thrown to the public whenever. Okay. So in summary, ratio schedules are going to create a greater initial response. So dogs, they sit, treat, sit, treat. Dogs know right away, okay, and they learn pretty quickly their tricks. So once they know they do something, they're going to get rewarded. A variable schedule is going to be more resistant to extinction because I don't know when I'm going to get rewarded. I'm more likely to keep doing what I'm doing. Excuse me. Sorry for that. Okay, a continuous reinforcement is going to cause the fastest learning. So again, sit food. Right away, we know quickly, okay, if I sit, I'm going to get the food. So the learning becomes very quick. When we did the girls' names with nerds, it was like girls' name nerds. Eventually, for most of the students, it was like I learned right away. If I say a girl's name, I'm going to get a reward because it was continuous. So then I learned really quickly. Also, obviously, immediate reinforcement is way more effective than delayed. So this is like your dog sits, and then a week later you reward him randomly. The dog's never going to connect the two. It has to be immediate. Sit, reward, sit, reward. Oh, okay, if I sit, I get a reward. Okay, then we have a term called shaping. So shaping is basically a procedure for teaching complex behaviors and reinforces, but in approximations. So again, this is the whole idea of doing it in increments. So teaching a child how to swim. We don't just throw the kid into the pool and say, okay, sink and swim. It's kind of like, okay, you hold on to the little ledge, you paddle your feet, we're going to dip your head in water, and there's like a very much in steps. Same thing with driving a car. Usually if you go to driving school, it's like, okay, 10 and 2, or, wherever 10 and 2 is over here. Where are the brakes? Look over your shoulder. We're going to do it in increments. Teaching someone how to play basketball, teaching someone how to do ceramics is all going to be in very much steps rather than just like here, just learn it. That's called shaping. Okay. Then we have something called token economies, which a lot of us had when we were little, probably. It's pretty much you get a token for every good behavior you do, and then you can then exchange those tokens as if it was currency or money, and then you can go like buy something. So I know for a lot of younger kids, it's like for every 3 books you read, here's a sticker. And then as you got stickers throughout the week, at the end of the week, there's like a teacher store, and you can take all those stickers that you've earned to like buy something. Chuck E. Cheese, Dave & Buster's, same thing. You guys play a game, you guys get all these tickets, you take those tickets and you go buy essentially, useless things from the display case, like no offense to Slinkies or whatever else they give you in those places, but that would be considered token economy. Another more real life example too can be at a hospital or, like a mental institution or prison. So it's like, for every good behavior you do, you get to earn something. And at the end of the week, you can take all of those earnings and either trade it in for a TV show or an ice cream hour or a visitation from a friend or family member or like an outing. So all of that would be considered token economies. Okay, then, over justification effect. This is pretty much when we are rewarded too much for the thing we're doing that eventually we lose our intrinsic motivation. So some of you guys used to be like really good learners and you love to read and you love to, learn or draw, but eventually maybe we get so stuck on the reward. So like the college acceptance or the money or the praise, eventually lose the love of our passion for learning or playing our sport or playing our instrument, etc. Okay, and then learning observational was the last one. So it's a quick review from operant conditioning. So operant conditioning, we had Thorndike, and his animal of choice was going to be cats, and then his whole idea is law of effect. We had Skinner. Animal of choice was rats and pigeons, and so his whole idea was rewards and punishments and operant conditioning. Okay, learning observational learning. This is the easy one. We basically learn through our models. So watching TV, watching your peers, watching your friends, which is your peers, watching your parents, watching all those things. So things that we learned. So it's kind of why our hand mnemonic, it's our middle finger, because we learned that the middle finger meant something, whether through it was school, TV, friends, parents, yada, yada. Okay, it counts for a lot of our learning. So even just learning how to use the internet or play basketball or, play your video games, you have to first learn from someone, and then, or you just by watching them, you can learn how we dress. We're very much heavily affected by social media and the world around us. Our styles keep changing. Your passion for music can change. So us just observing other people can attribute to a lot of our learning. Even our parents, as much as some of us may not want to be like our parents, we might actually be very similar to them in the way we argue, the way we communicate, the way we love. And so observational learning accounts for a lot of human learning. Okay, and then we had this guy. We had Tolman. He is in charge of the cognitive maps and the idea of latent or hidden learning. So you basically put rats in a maze and then just let them roam around. His whole idea was saying that you didn't have to actually give someone a reward at the end, like operant conditioning, for people to learn, but people can just learn. So what we used in our class was the idea of our campus. A lot of you guys have just learned our campus over time, not because someone actually gave you a reward to learn the map of campus, but just because through your walking around for the last 3-4 years, you have a really good cognitive map of our campus, or of Orange County or LA County if you drive a lot. So unless you've actually sat there and memorized a map, or someone gave you a treat at the end, most of you probably just learned our school campus and Orange County, LA County driving just by simply doing it. And so that whole idea is called latent learning. Okay, then again, models. Our main person is going to be, I hope he's here, is Albert Bandura. His famous experiment was Bobodal. The fancy word for observational learning is social learning theory, or SLT. And so again, quick review of that experiment was that he's basically saying that when kids watch aggressive TV shows or video games, they're more likely to then model that aggressive behavior. So he had the Bobo doll, where he had one group of kids watch an adult who was his model punch and kick this Bobo doll, and then you put those same kids back in a room with the Bobo doll, and you kind of made them frustrated by letting them not maybe play with other toys. And then through their frustration, if the kids that saw the original model, those kids were more likely to hit and kick the Bobo doll, whereas the other kids who didn't watch the model didn't do any of that. Okay, so quick again recap of all your people. Let me see if I can do this really quickly. So you have Pavlov, which is classical conditioning, is going to be Pavlov. Maybe I should just write it. Like me writing it out is probably going to be easier if I can write on this thing. Okay, so we have classical. Oh, that's a terrible color. Okay, we have classical conditioning. Okay, we're going to have Pavlov, and we have Pavlov, and we have Watson. Okay. His experiment was the dogs. Watson's experiment was little Albert. Okay. Then we have operant conditioning. I should probably just type it, you guys. It's probably better, huh? Let me just type it for you. I'm annoyed with myself. Okay. Classical conditioning, you have Pavlov is going to be salivating dogs. Okay, you have Watson. His experiment was little Albert. Okay. Then we have operant conditioning. We have Thorndike, and he did law of, don't judge my typing, law of effect. And then we have Skinner, who had the Skinner box, rats, pigeons, and what was it? Operant conditioning. Duh. Okay. Then we have observational learning category. Okay, we have Bandura, who came up with SLT theory, which is essentially social learning theory, which is observational learning. And his was the Bobo doll. Okay, then we had Tolman, who was latent learning and right? And cognitive maps. Okay, so those are your people, everybody. Hopefully you guys are studying, and just know I miss you guys, and I hope you guys are doing well and trying to get through all of this craziness. Okay, have a good day, everyone. Bye.